February 2015, German police kicked in the door of an apartment in Leipzig. Inside, in an ordinary bedroom, they found something that didn't belong there. Shelves stacked floor to ceiling with drugs, meticulously sorted by type and weight, next to a laptop still logged into an online store with 14,000 customer orders on record. The man who ran that store wasn't a cartel boss. He wasn't even old enough to legally rent a car in most countries. He was 20 years old, he lived with his mother, and for over a year, prosecutors say he single-handedly ran one of the largest online drug operations Europe had ever seen, alone, from that one room. This is the story of Shiny Flakes, and how a kid who wanted better customer service than the black market built something that looked disturbingly like Amazon. Maximilian Schmidt grew up in Leipzig, in eastern Germany, an unremarkable kid by most accounts. No criminal record, no trouble with police, the kind of teenager who spent most of his free time on a computer rather than out with friends. At 18, he was working a job at a restaurant. Nothing about his life suggested where it was headed. Then, sometime around 2013, he had a conversation online about a website called Silk Road, a marketplace where people could buy and sell drugs anonymously, hidden behind layers of encryption. Schmidt found the concept fascinating. Not just the illegality of it, but the inefficiency. Buying drugs on the street, he thought, was clunky, unreliable, and honestly, kind of a bad customer experience. He believed he could build something better. Here's the detail worth holding on to. Schmidt would later say he never used drugs himself. Whatever pulled him into this world, it wasn't a craving for the product. It was something closer to an obsession with building a system. In December 2013, Schmidt quit his restaurant job and, from his bedroom in his mother's apartment, launched a website, Shiny Flakes. He found a supplier, sourced product, and set up a storefront that looked less like a shady forum post and more like a functioning e-commerce site. Categories, product listings, customer reviews, all of it. This is the detail that made Shiny Flakes different from most operations like it. And it's also the detail that's often reported inaccurately. Despite being called a dark web empire in most headlines, Shiny Flakes wasn't actually hidden behind Tor or any anonymizing network. It was, for a period, findable through a normal Google search. That single choice, building something searchable rather than something buried, is either the boldest move in this entire story or the single biggest mistake. Depending on how you look at it, both are true. Once the site was live, growth was almost immediate. Schmidt sold cannabis, cocaine, maidama, LSD, amphetamines, even prescription medications, an entire catalog, priced, categorized, and shipped like any legitimate online retailer. He accepted payment exclusively in Bitcoin, still a novelty to most people in 2013, but perfectly suited to a business built entirely around staying untraceable. To put the scale of this in perspective, over roughly 14 months of operation, investigators say Schmidt shipped somewhere in the range of 1 ton of drugs, not grams, not kilos, a literal ton, worldwide, using nothing more exotic than the regular postal service. One prosecutor would later describe the whole operation in a single phrase that stuck: Amazon for drugs. And the strangest part of that comparison is how accurate it actually was. Schmidt didn't just sell product. He built a support structure to keep customers coming back, which meant, somewhere in this operation, there had to be a review system. And whatever Schmidt saw in those reviews, it clearly didn't bother him. Here's how it actually worked. Mechanically, stripped of the mythology, Schmidt ran everything alone. No partners, no crew, no cut to split with anyone else. Sourcing the product, managing the website, packaging every single order, and physically mailing it out himself. Every few days, he'd carry parcels, sometimes dozens at a time, to a public postal drop station not far from his home, in full view of the street, and crucially, in view of security cameras. Customers paid up front in Bitcoin. Product shipped in discreet packaging, disguised the way most darknet-adjacent sellers disguise shipments. Vacuum-sealed, mislabeled, blended in with ordinary parcel traffic. For over a year, This system worked without a single serious interruption. No wiretaps closing in, no informants. Just one teenager, alone in a bedroom, running logistics for what investigators would later estimate as millions of euros in drug sales. But a system built entirely by one overconfident person has exactly one point of failure. And that point of failure was about to make two very ordinary, very human mistakes. The first mistake was almost embarrassingly simple. On one outgoing package, Schmidt wrote the wrong return address. When the parcel couldn't be delivered and got sent back, postal workers opened it to figure out where it belonged and found drugs inside. That alone might have blown over. But the second mistake compounded it. Schmidt kept using the same postal drop-off point over and over, week after week, for more than a year, the exact same station, visible on the exact same security cameras, each time carrying the same kind of suspicious, hastily wrapped parcels. Investigators didn't need a breakthrough. They needed patience. They started watching that postal station, and they started waiting for the same face to show up again. Once police connected the returned package to a pattern of similar packages moving through the same drop point, the investigation accelerated fast. They tracked the man using that station, followed him, and eventually traced him back to an apartment in Leipzig, the home Schmidt shared with his mother and her partner. On February 27, 2015, police raided that apartment. What they found inside stunned even experienced narcotics officers. Reports describe well over 100 kilograms of assorted drugs, methodically sorted and stored on shelves in Schmidt's bedroom, along with tens of thousands of euros in cash. They also seized his computer, and on it, a database investigators would later describe as almost absurdly well organized. A customer list running to roughly 14,000 entries, detailed enough that it would go on to trigger more than 4,000 separate criminal investigations into Schmidt's former buyers across the country. Here's the detail that made this case genuinely unusual, and it's the moment the story stops being about Schmidt alone. Once in custody, he didn't fight the charges or lawyer up in silence. He confessed almost immediately, in detail, and then, notably, became a cooperating witness, providing testimony that helped prosecute a wave of his own former customers. Investigators also found Bitcoin wallets tied to the operation, some estimated at hundreds of thousands of euros in value, but a portion of those funds, held in wallets police couldn't access, reportedly remains unaccounted for to this day. In August 2015, Schmidt stood before a Leipzig court. Because of his age and what a court-appointed psychologist described as significant emotional immaturity, he was tried and sentenced under German juvenile law, rather than as a full adult, a legal distinction that would ultimately shape how much time he actually served. The sentence, 7 years in juvenile detention, along with a court order to forfeit roughly 3 million euros in proceeds from the operation. Here's a detail that's easy to miss in the headlines. That psychologist's report on Schmidt didn't describe remorse. According to the assessment cited around his case, what the evaluator found instead was something closer to pride. Schmidt ultimately served just over 4 years of that 7-year sentence before being released on parole in 2019, a fraction of the time, for an operation that moved, by some estimates, close to a metric ton of product across international borders. Go back to that detail from the very beginning, the fact that Schmidt's storefront wasn't buried in the encrypted corners of the internet most people imagine when they hear dark web. For a stretch of its existence, you could find it with an ordinary search engine. That's what makes this story land differently than most drug empire cases. This wasn't a criminal genius outsmarting law enforcement with sophisticated technology. It was one teenager, betting that competence and good customer service would matter more than being hidden, and for over a year, he was right. What finally caught him wasn't an FBI-style sting or a mole inside his operation. It was a mislabeled envelope and a habit of walking to the same mailbox one too many times. Maximilian Schmidt's story didn't end quietly in prison either. Years after his release, he'd find himself back in a courtroom, accused of doing something disturbingly similar all over again. Which raises the question this case leaves hanging in the air. Was Shiny Flakes really about one broken kid chasing a thrill? Or was it a preview of exactly how easy this kind of operation has become for anyone patient enough to run it like a real business?